Monster Hunter World Iceborne's Endgame can be a challenge for the best of hunters out there, but with the right weapons and builds, even endgame tasks can easily be achieved. I'm Darcblade, and we're back with even more amazing builds for Monster Hunter World Iceborne. In this episode we're taking a look at endgame builds for the Sword and Shield. The Sword and Shield is a very versatile weapon, able to deal out slashing attacks, blunt attacks, whilst at the same time use items without having to sheathe the weapon. On top of that, it can easily mount a monster, make use of slinger bursts, as well as efficiently utilise elemental and element attacks. The builds I use tend to focus and specialise in a few of the multitude of aspects that the Sword and Shield can utilise. Now, a disclaimer for this series though, these builds are meant for endgame hunters, who have completed the main story and have access to all armours and weapons the game has to offer. A large jewel collection is also desired, but you can always swap out the jewels here and there if you do not have what is shown in the videos. So the first build I use is the Master's Touch Sword and Shield build. This is a high DPS build, making use of the Master's Touch skill found on the Teostra armor set. So for this you'll need the Kaiser Crown beta, the Rex Royal Mail beta, the Kaiser Van Braces beta, Kaiser Coil beta, and the Garuga Greaves beta. I'm also using a Challenger Charm 4, and for my weapon I'm using the Lunatic Rose, which is the Golden Raffian Sword and Shield. This has an affinity increase augmentation, health regen augmentation, and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. The mantles, as always, are down to personal preference. As for the jewels, you've got a fair few to play around with, to which I've gone for Tenderizer jewels to max out the weakness exploit skill, a Challenger jewel to max out the agitator skill, Vitality jewels to max out the health boost skill, an attack jewel to get the attack boost to at least level 4. I've then gone for critical jewels to give us a maxed out crit boost skill, protection jewel to provide us some divine blessing, a phoenix jewel to provide us a point in the coalescence skill, a flight jewel for the airborne skill, expert jewels for some critical eye, and then finally you'll have a jewel to play around with, to which I've gone for a shield jewel to provide us the guard up skill. As for the jewels in the mantles, these are down to personal preference, but I've gone for attack jewels to give us some more attack boost, and iron war jewels to give us a few points in the guard skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 444 with a decent chunk of white sharpness. You have 65% base affinity, which will easily be 100 when you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a poison rating of 360 with a strong defense of 928 that is strong against fire, thunder and dragon, but unfortunately weak to water and ice. As for the skills, you have Critical Eye level 7. Critical Eye increases the base affinity of the build. You have Agitator level 5. Agitator is a buff that kicks in when a monster becomes enraged. Basically, when a monster becomes enraged, you'll gain increased raw attack as well as affinity. You have Attack Boost at level 4, which can be potentially level 6. Attack Boost increases the raw damage of a build, and at level 4 or above it also provides you a bonus 5% affinity. You have Health Boost level 3, giving us that potential maximum of 200 health. You have Critical Boost level 3, increasing the damage when we crit a monster, but this only applies to the raw portion of our attack. So with this build it does nothing in regards to the poison attack. But nonetheless, this is a useful skill, especially as this build does have high affinity. Anyway, you have Weakness Exploit level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that gives us bonus affinity so long as we're attacking monster weak points, and should these weak points be tenderized through clutch claw attacks first, this bonus affinity is increased even further. At level 3 it can be a potential bonus of 50%. You have Blast Attack level 2, this is a byproduct of the gear, it's not really needed on this build whatsoever, so it's a little bit wasted, but nonetheless we still had a lot of customization to play around with. You have Heat Guard level 1, a byproduct of the gear, but it's still useful. It prevents any damage when you're in hot areas such as the lava zones in the Guiding Lands or Elder's Recess. You have Airborne level 1, increasing the damage of our airborne jumping attacks. You have Latent Power level 1, this is again another byproduct, but can be useful. It's a buff that kicks in after you've been fighting a monster for a certain amount of time, or you've taken a set amount of damage from a monster, and when this buff kicks in it gives you bonus affinity and reduced stamina depletion. Anyway, you have Divine Blessing level 1. It would have been nice to get this higher, but we had limited jewels to play around with. Divine Blessing gives us a chance of taking reduced damage when we take a hit from a monster. You have Guard Up level 1, allowing us to block unblockable attacks. This was an optional skill when it comes to our jewels, but I tend to use it as a last minute defense move if I'm not able to perform a Leap of Faith to dodge a monster's ultimate attack. Anyway, you have Coalescence level 1. Coalescence is a buff that kicks in when you remove a blight or other ailment from your hunter, giving you increased raw attack, elemental attack, and ailment attack. And then finally, when you're wearing the glider mantle, you'll also have guard level 2, increasing the effectiveness when it comes to blocking. And then finally, for the set bonus, you have Teostra's Technique Master's Touch, preventing any sharpness loss on our weapon so long as we're critting a monster. And as this build has incredibly high affinity, we should see minimal sharpness loss with this build. So there you have it. As you can see, it is a very strong DPS focused build, combining various skills that increase our raw attack, as well as the majority of the affinity based skills. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pros for this build is its high damage output. Like I just mentioned, utilising the various attack and affinity skills this build has, we're able to bring down monsters quite quickly. On top of that, this build also has some damage over time effects thanks to the poison weapon we're using. Poison is a wonderful element at master rank, as it allows you to deal unseen damage to a monster over time, adding to this build's overall damage output. It also means it's a build that can be used against pretty much any monster. Unless they're completely immune to poison, almost every monster in Monster Hunter World Iceborne can be poisoned, which makes this build quite a universal build. And then finally, when it comes to the pros, this is a wonderful build when it comes to players who dislike having to manage their sharpness gauge, as you should see next to no sharpness loss when using it. But unfortunately, every build has its cons. The main con for this build is, unfortunately, if you were to use a different weapon that required handicraft, you would have to swap out jewels here and there, which could potentially result in a loss of DPS. And unfortunately, the other con for this build is it does unfortunately lack in quality of life skills. But quality of life skills can be subjective. To be honest, sometimes the best defense is a good offense, and this build definitely has that. So regardless of the monster you're taking on, this build should be able to bring them down quite quickly, at least for the Sword and Shield. Which brings us on to our next build, which is the support Sword and Shield build. This build is all about going into a hunt and helping your fellow hunters out. Making use of key support skills such as wide range, speed eating, free meal and such, you're able to provide healing to a hunting party, keeping everyone alive, and whilst at the same time this build also comes with a few DPS options and survival options, making for one of my personal favourite support builds. So for this you'll need the Rex Royal Helm Beta, the Golden Loon Mail Beta, the Rex Royal Braces Beta, the Golden Loon Coil Beta and the Rex Royal Greaves Beta. I'm also using a Friendship Charm 5, and for my weapon I'm using the Ruinous Madness, which is the Ruiner Nergigante Sword and Shield. This has an affinity increase augmentation, health regen augmentation and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. As for the mantles and specialist tools, these are down to personal preference. But as for the jewels, you've only got a few to play around with, unfortunately, to which I've gone for Challenger jewels to max out the Agitator skill. I've then gone for Tenderizer jewels to max out Weakness Exploit, Sated jewels to max out the Free Meal skill, Gobbler jewels to max out the Speed Eating skill, Expert jewels for some critical eye, and Vitality jewels to max out the Health Boost skill. The jewels on the Glider Mantle are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for more Expert jewels and a Flight jewel to provide us the Airborne skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You'll have an attack of 444 with a decent chunk of white sharpness. You have 30% base affinity, which will be 80% affinity when you're on a hunt and attacking monster weak points. That'd be tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. This can even go up to 90% when Agitator kicks in as well. You have a dragon rating of 180 with high Elder Seal, with a strong defense of 936 that is strong against fire and dragon, neutral against ice, but unfortunately weak to water and thunder. As for the skills, you have Agitator level 5, Wide Range level 5. Wide Range is one of the key support skills. Basically, when you consume a potion, the full effects will be passed on to your allies around you. So at the start of the hunt, say you drink a Mega Demon Drug potion, then the effect is passed to all your allies, or even Palicos. And when you're fighting a monster, should you drink a Mega Potion, that effect will also be passed on to your allies, keeping everyone alive. Anyway, you also have Divine Blessing at level 5, greatly increasing the chance at you receiving less damage when you take a hit from a monster. You have Attack Boost at level 4, Health Boost at level 3, Critical Eye at level 3, which can be potentially level 6. You have Weakness Exploit at level 3, Free Meal at level 3, giving us a 75% chance of not actually consuming that said potion when we drink it. And as we should be drinking potions a lot during a hunt with this build to keep you and your hunting party alive, this vastly reduces the amount of times needed to go back to camp to restock. You have Speed Eating level 3, greatly increasing how quickly we drink a potion, to the point that potions and consumables are drunk as if they're shots. And you'll have Airborne at level 1 when we're wearing our mantles. As for the set bonuses, you have 2 of them. First is the Tigrex Essence, Free Meal Secret, allowing us to get the Free Meal skill up from level 1 to that potential level 3. And you'll have the Gold Raffian Essence, 2 set bonus, Divine Blessing Secret, allowing us to get the Divine Blessing skill from level 3 to the maximum of level 5. So there you have it, that is the support build that I tend to use with the Sword and Shield. In all honesty, it's a decent build in itself without even having the support skill options. And as a result, you can use this build solo, if you so wish. You can swap out the wide range charm, the Friendship Charm 5, for something more DPS orientated. And thus you'll get a build that is still quite strong for solo play. The choice is always up to you. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its support options. Having wide range, free meal at level 3, and speed eating enables the hunter to keep their hunting party alive during even the toughest hunts. On top of that, it's also a build that has damage options despite being a support build, so when your hunting party isn't taking damage, you can easily contribute to the damage output of a hunt. And then finally, when it comes to the pros, this is actually quite a defensive build as well, thanks to health boost and especially Divine Blessing at level 5 coupled with the defense augmentation. It means that you can pretty much take some of the hardest hits and receive minimal damage. On top of that, after you've taken a hit, you can easily restore that health thanks to speed eating. But unfortunately, every build has its cons. Unfortunately, the biggest con for this build is its lack of duel customization. It has very few duel slots to play around with, and as a result we missed out on a few skills that are useful for support builds, such as recovery up. But I've only found this a minor con, as this build is still quite effective at keeping a hunting party alive. The other major con for this build though is, unfortunately, it is a build that does not really work with weapons that require handicraft. If you use a weapon that does need handicraft or can get to purple sharpness, you may have to make sacrifices in order to get that sharpness rating up by swapping out jewels or charms for various handicraft jewels or charms. But regardless, like I said, this is a build I tend to use when playing the support role. And I've never really had a problem in keeping a hunting party alive, and while at the same time I love the fact that this build does have some DPS options, which means that despite using a support build, it feels that I can still contribute to damaging a monster during a hunt. Which brings us on to the next build, which is the True Critical Element build. This build is a strong elemental DPS build that makes use of the Sword and Shield's fast sword attacks. Now it should be noted that when it comes to elements and ailments, only the sword attacks of the Sword and Shield can actually benefit from the elements and ailments, but the shield attacks themselves can deal exhaust and knockout damage to a monster, so that's something to keep in mind. So for this build you need the Golden Headdress Beta, the Silver Soul Mail Beta, Silver Soul Braces Beta, the Silver Soul Coil Beta and the Silver Soul Greaves Beta. I'm also using a Frost Charm 5, and for my weapon I'm using the Nada Bush, which I believe that's how it's pronounced, which is the Barioth Sword and Shield. This has an elemental up augmentation and an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. As for the mantles, these are down to personal preference. But when it comes to the jewels, you have a decent amount to play around with, to which I've gone for a Frost Jewel to max out the Frost attack of this build. I've then gone for a Sharp Jewel to provide as protective polish, a Hard Enduring Jewel for the Item Prolonger skill, a Tenderizer Jewel for Weakness Exploit, Handicraft and Vitality Jewels for both an increase in our sharpness and maxed out health boost, and then some Expert Jewels for some Critical Eye. As for the jewels on the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for Expert Jewels on the Temporal Mantle and Hard Defense Jewels on the Glider Mantle. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 371 with a decent chunk of white sharpness. You have 50% base affinity, which can easily be 100 when you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a elemental ice rating of 640 with a strong defense of 956 that is strong against fire and dragon, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. As for the skills, you have ice attack level 6, increasing the ice rating and damage of this build, and this ice attack can be replaced with other elements should you decide to use a different charm and weapon and such. Anyway, you have slinger capacity level 5, increasing the amount of slinger ammunition we can carry. You have Critical Eye at level 4, which can be potentially level 6. You have Health Boost level 3, Critical Boost level 3. Remember, Critical Boost only applies to the raw damage portion of our attack. It does nothing to the elemental portion. You have Weakness Exploit level 3, Handicraft level 3, Item Prolonger level 3, increasing the duration of certain buffs that items provide, such as Demon Powder and that. And this also works in conjunction with Protective Polish, which we'll talk about in a second. You have Windproof level 1, a byproduct of the gear, but helps resist minor wind attacks. You have Protective Polish level 1, which is a wonderful buff that allows you to put a protective coating over your sharpness gauge when you sharpen your weapon, preventing any sharpness loss for a small duration of time. And this duration of time is increased even more thanks to Item Prolonger. Anyway, finally, when you're wearing your mantles, you have a defense boost at level 6, increasing our defense even more. And finally, for the set bonus, you have the Silver Rathalos Essence. While wearing 2 pieces of the armor, you have Slinger Ammo Secret, increasing their slinging capacity skill from level 3 to that maximum of level 5. And when wearing 4 pieces of the armor, you'll have True Critical Element, increasing the elemental portion of our damage when we crit a monster. So think of it like critical boost, but for the elemental portion of our attack. And True Critical Element is even stronger than the base version of Critical Element. So there you have it. As you can see, it is a strong elemental DPS build, able to bring down monsters quickly so long as you're taking into account a monster's elemental weaknesses. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its elemental damage. As I just mentioned, so long as you're using this build against monsters that are weak to whatever element you are using, you're able to bring them down quite quickly. Which brings us on to our other pro, which is this build is quite customizable. You can easily swap out the weapon, charm and that single jewel for weapons and charms of different elements. So if you didn't want to use an ice weapon, you can easily swap out the Barioth Sword and Shield for a different weapon that has a different element. Just remember to swap out the charm and that single jewel as well, to match whatever element you are using. And then finally, when it comes to the pros of this build, is when it does come to switching to other weapons and that, the build already makes use of handicraft jewels, and even though this weapon in particular doesn't really need any additional handicraft, thanks to having handicraft at level 3, you can normally get most weapons to purple sharpness, or at least a sliver of purple sharpness, and this combined with Protective Polish and Item Prolonger means that you should be able to keep that purple sharpness for a decent portion of the hunt. But unfortunately, every build comes with cons. I would say the biggest con for this build is its defensive options when it comes to quality of life skills. The other con, which is more of a sword and shield con more than anything, is if you want maximum damage, you can only really make use of sword attacks, and you can't really make use of the shield attacks, unfortunately. But regardless, like I said, so long as you're taking into account a monster's elemental weaknesses and you're countering them with the right weapons and charms, this build can really rip through them easily when using the right element. Which brings us on to the next build, which is a little bit of a quirky build, which is the Sword and Shield Mounter build. This build is a versatile build, which combines DPS options, survival options, defensive options, and more importantly, provides us the Master Mounter skill, giving us maximum opportunities at mounting a monster during a hunt. The Sword and Shield is a weapon that can easily mount a monster, as you don't even need a ledge, slope, or other environmental aid to perform mounting attacks. So for this build you need the Warg Scarf Beta, the Fell Shroud Meld Beta, Fell Shroud Braces Beta, Ruinous Coil Beta, Ruinous Greaves Beta, and the Challenger Charm 4. And for my weapon I'm using the Ruinous Madness, which again is the Ruina Nergigante Sword and Shield. This has an affinity increase augmentation, health regen augmentation, and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase augmentation. Mantles, as always, are down to personal preference. As for the jewels, you've got a fair few to play around with here, to which I've gone for Earplug jewels to max out the Earplug skill, I've gone for Challenger jewels to max out the Agitator skill, Tenderizer jewels for maxed out Weakness Exploit, Vitality jewels for maxed out Health Boost, Expert jewels for some Critical Eye, Attack jewels for some Attack Boost, Maintenance jewels for the Tool Specialist skill, a Medicine jewel for the Recovery Up skill, a Recovery jewel for the Recovery Speed skill, and then finally for the jewels on our mantles I've gone for Expert and Flight jewels to provide us more Critical Eye and the Airborne skill. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have built with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt, and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 444 with white sharpness. You have 20% base affinity, which can be 70% affinity so long as you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a dragon rating of 210 with high Elder Seal, with a strong defense of 916 that is strong against water and ice, but unfortunately weak to the other elements. As for the skills, you have Earplugs level 5, a wonderful quality of life skill that allows a hunter to ignore all monster roars. You have Agitator level 5, Attack Boost level 4, Health Boost level 3, Recovery Up level 3. Recovery Up is a skill that increases the amount we heal through healing techniques and methods, so when we drink a potion it will heal more than if we didn't have Recovery Up, and this also applies to the Health Regen skill as well as the various set bonuses we are using. You have Recovery Speed level 3. Recovery Speed increases the rate at which our health regenerates naturally over time, and this can apply to the entire health bar thanks to one of the set bonuses we're using, which we'll talk about in a minute. You have Weakness Exploit level 3, Tool Specialist level 3, reducing the cooldown on our various specialised tools and mantles and boosters and such. You have Ice Resistance level 1, a byproduct of the gear we're wearing, but increases our ice resistance a little bit. You have Dragon Attack level 1, again another byproduct of the armour we're wearing, but as we are using a dragon weapon, this does increase the dragon damage of our attacks. You have Critical Eye level 1, which can be potentially level 4 when we're wearing mantles. You have one of the main skills for this build, which is Master Mounter, which makes it easier to mount monsters. And you'll have Airborne level 1 when wearing the Glider Mantle. As for the set bonuses, you have two of them. First is the Val Solvane Super Recovery, which is the Black Veil Val Sack set bonus, allowing our health to recover naturally over time past the red portion of health, basically allowing us to recover the entire health bar naturally over time. Normally you can only really recover the red portion of your health bar, but with Super Recovery it pretty much allows us to go past that for a constant heal over time effect. And then finally you have the Nergigante's Ambition Hasten Recovery, allowing us to restore health when we're attacking a monster, and this also works in conjunction with the health regen augmentation. So as you can see, this is quite an all-rounder build, having DPS options, health regen options, defensive options, and quality of life options. But the main event for this build is the Master Mounter skill, thanks to the Sword and Shield having a natural ability to mount monsters thanks to the backstep, followed up by the charge slash and the normal standard sword slash. It results in a hunter being able to mount monsters multiple times during a hunt, especially without environmental aid. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pros for this build is it's an all-round build. It can be used pretty much against any monster, although if they are weak to the dragon element, then this build is going to do even more damage. But thanks to the Ruinous Madness having such high raw attack, you're normally able to take it against most monsters. On top of that, it does have quality of life skills, health regen skills, defensive skills, and DPS skills, making it a decent all-round build. But the other pro is its ability to mount monsters quite easily. Thanks to the Master Mounter skill, the Sword and Shield's natural ability to mount a monster without the use of environmental aid, and the Glider Mantle, it means that during a hunt you should be able to mount a monster multiple times. And then finally, when it comes to the pros for this build, whilst yes, I did say it's an all-round build, but it should be noted that its health regen options are incredibly high. Thanks to having recovery up, recovery speed, super recovery, hasten recovery, and the health regen augmentation, you're able to keep your health high through just attacking a monster. But every build has its cons. The main cons for this build is unfortunately it does lack a little bit when it comes to DPS. It does lack a few DPS orientated skills like high critical eye or crit boost, but that's normally the price you pay when you invest in quality of life skills or defensive skills. The other con for this build though is unfortunately it won't work with weapons that require handicraft, as you would have to swap out charms or jewels, resulting in a loss of DPS, quality of life or defensive skills. But nonetheless, this is a fun build to use, especially if you do like mounting a monster and want to use a build that can take on hunts quite comfortably. Which brings us on to our fifth and final build, which is the Master's Touch Guiding Land build. This build is very similar to the first build that we featured here, but has a few key changes. Whilst yes, it still makes use of the Master's Touch set bonus, it also is a build that is designed to be used in the Guiding Lands, making use of the various Guiding Land related skills, while at the same time being able to bring high DPS to a hunt. So for this build you need the Kaiser Crown Beta, the Rex Royal Mail Beta, Kaiser Vambraces Beta, Kaiser Coil Beta, and the Guru Grease Beta. I'm also using the Handicraft Charm for this time, and for my weapon I'm using the Soulfire Barbed Ruin. This is the Lunostra Nergigante Sword and Shield. This has an affinity increase augmentation, health regen augmentation, and then an augmentation of your choice, to which I've gone for a defense increase. As always, the mantles are down to personal preference. As for the jewels, you've got a lot to play around with here, to which I've gone for critical jewels for that crit boost skill. I've then gone for expert jewels for some critical eye. I've then gone for destroyer jewels for the maxed out part breaker skill, vitality jewels for the health boost skill, a geology jewel for the geologist skill, a fortitude jewel for the fortify skill, an attack jewel to increase the attack boost of this build, tenderizer jewels for some weakness exploit, expert jewels for some critical eye, and then finally I've gone for a blast jewel to max out the blast attack skill. As for the jewels on the mantles, these are down to personal preference, to which I've gone for attack jewels, a flight jewel, and a slider jewel. So if you've done what I've done here, you should have a build with 150 health, 100 stamina, which will be 200 health and 150 stamina when you're on a hunt and taking all your relevant consumables. You have an attack of 412 with purple sharpness. You have 50% base affinity, which can easily be 100% affinity when you're attacking monster weak points that have been tenderized through clutch claw attacks first. You have a blast rating of 210 with a strong defense of 924. That is strong against fire, thunder and dragon, but unfortunately weak to water and ice. As for the skills, you have critical eye level 7, blast attack level 4. Blast attack increases the blast rating, damage and build up of this build. You have handicraft level 4, attack boost level 3, which could be potentially level 5. You have health boost level 3, critical boost level 3, weakness exploit level 3, part breaker level 3, one of the key skills for the Guiding Lands. Part breaker allows you to break off monster materials from monsters more easily. You have heat guard level 1, latent power level 1, fortify level 1. Fortifier is a skill that kicks in every time you faint. Basically when you faint and respawn, you'll receive the buff, increasing our attack and defense, and this can be applied up to 2 times. Anyway, you have Geologist level 1, allowing us to loot monster materials twice whilst in the Guiding Lands instead of just once, at least from high tier monsters. As always, at the time of this video, it wasn't clear if this is a bug or not, but it was working at the time of this video. Anyway, you'll also have Haste and Recovery level 1. This is the Nergigante set bonus, but it's also found on the weapon we're using, allowing us to restore health when we attack a monster, and this does also work in conjunction with the health regen augmentation, giving us some health regen options. And when we're wearing our mantles, we'll also have Airborne level 1 and Affinity Sliding level 1. Affinity Sliding is a skill that kicks in when we slide down a slope, increasing our affinity for a small duration of time. As for the set bonuses, you have the Teostra's Technique, Master's Touch, preventing any sharpness loss when we crit a monster, and as this build has high affinity, we should be able to maintain that small amount of purple sharpness we have on the weapon for long periods of time. So there you have it. As you can see, again, just like the first build in this video, it is a strong DPS build, but makes use of the various skills related to the Guiding Lands. But every build has its pros and cons. The biggest pro for this build is its high damage output. Thanks to having high affinity, blast attack, attack boost, you're able to take on hunts quite quickly with this build. On top of that, it's also a build that works great in the Guiding Lands thanks to utilising the various Guiding Lands skills such as Part Breaker, Fortify and Geologist. And the other major pro with this build is it can pretty much get away with using any weapon. Thanks to having Handicraft at level 4, you can swap out the Soulfire Barb Ruin if you want to, if you don't like using blast weapons. But if you do so, remember that you'll also lose out on the Haste and Recovery skill, which does add to this build's survivability. But unfortunately there is a major con for this build, and that is unfortunately it's a build that doesn't really work when it comes to blocking monster attacks. When you block on a monster's attack, you do use up sharpness. And because we've only got a small portion of purple sharpness, should we block too many monsters' attacks, it will drop us into white sharpness, as the Master's Touch doesn't apply for when we're raising our shields. But regardless, this is an efficient build to use in the Guiding Lands, and it can also be used against any monster in some respects. Very few monsters are completely resistant to the blast element, so feel free to use it against any monster you want. So there we have it. Those are endgame builds that I like to use for the Sword and Shield in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Now of course there are more endgame builds to come, and as I always say, you don't have to use what is shown in this video. Use what you want to use, as most tasks in Monster Hunter World Iceborne can be taken on with any weapon or gear set. But anyway, I hope you found this video helpful or informative, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you endgame builds I use for the Sword and Shield in Monster Hunter World Iceborne. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.